are talking The Black Book. This is an anthology movie with a collection of terrifying tales with a wraparound story. So the conceit of the wraparound is this. We have an antique bookshop and the owner is this strange kind of guy, and he gets this customer in who is somewhat of a book snob, asking for rare editions, etc. And he is offered this one-of-a-kind book which is said to be cursed, and the owner says to him, "I'll sell it to you, but you mustn't read it, it's just for collecting." And of course the guy buys it and inevitably reads it, which then of course leads to the stories within this anthology. What will happen? You have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss The Black Book. I will be honest with you and say I'm not the biggest fan of anthology movies. I actually find the lack of characterization due to the short running time kind of takes it away from me, because you never really feel like you can kind of connect to the characters. There's one or two exceptions here, but nonetheless I feel for the most part anthology movies are not my favourite type of horror films, or any other type of film really. I also have to say, to point out that anthologies are put together in different ways. There are some types of anthology films, for example Creepshow, which are short films made to be an anthology. They tend to be maybe the higher profile films, but a lot of the lower budget ones tend to be just collections of pre-existing short films that have existed for years and then just kind of curated together. And then once in a while you'll kind of get a mixture of both, which I think may be the case of this one, because the director of the wraparound actually directed a couple of the short stories as well. And I've got a feeling some of these are kind of made to go in a collection, so to speak, whilst others were just short films that have been put on this collection. I'm not really going to go into these stories all that much. I'll just tell you that there's no real story here that stand out to me as a particularly great story. There's not one. Normally with anthologies you kind of get a mixture, it's a real mixed bag. This one, there's no great one, to be honest with you. At best I would say there's two which are passable. The first one I would say is one that was to do with snuff films, where this guy at college wants to do a thesis on a snuff film and gets a little bit too close to the kind of the subject matter for its own good. And another one, which is the final one, about a college professor who is kind of fed up with his kind of class mucking around, and he sort of says to them, you know, there's this curse if you mustn't say this particular phrase in front of a mirror, otherwise you'll be cursed, yada yada. And that enables him, of course, when kids do it, to actually invade their homes through the mirrors. And they're kind of your best ones, but even they aren't particularly good. Every single movie in this collection, every single short film, feels like it's actually a genuine student film. These things feel like they are made by students in their kind of doing their kind of film studies and kind of putting together their first attempts at filmmaking. Everything is kind of low budget. I don't think anything is particularly clever in regards to kind of the writing. The acting is all kind of like, you know, somewhat kind of a mixed bag at the best, shall we say. The camera work, again, everything is low budget, amateurish, and, you know, I mean, I guess none of them are like horribly offensive and just completely unwatchable, but it's just varying levels of mediocrity, basically. As I've said, the two ones that I think have the most interesting twists, they still have their problems. They're still very kind of low budget, and the one with the man in the mirror gets really kind of cheesy and hokey as well. But some of them are just kind of like a waste of time. The very first movie, Date Night, is about the only one with sort of creature effects in it, and that just seems pointless. It's just a kind of it's a twist to have a twist's sake and have a joke, and there's no real story to it. There's kind of one which is about a science fiction one, which is kind of a one which is about almost like a zombie apocalypse to a degree, but caused by kind of aliens. That, I suppose, was the most ambitious out of the movies, but it just really fails because of the low budget, and kind of it's just filmed in someone's kind of house and stuff like that, and you know, it's not helped by some very kind of low budget CGI and things like this. There's no real film which is great, and all of the films have a low budget guerrilla amateur style that I don't think some people may appreciate, and some of them are just kind of quite boring, to be honest with you. There's this one about this little girl who's got an imaginary friend or something, and she keeps finding stones in her bed. It's just boring. So it's unfortunately a collection of, I would say, the majority of below average films. None of them, I would say, are out and out horrible, offensive, bad, completely kind of trash. They all have at least, maybe some ideas, but it strikes me as short films that were made without really kind of much knowledge of filmmaking, or someone's skill level is kind of still quite early in their career, stuff like that. It's just not particularly interesting, unfortunately, and everything is at the very best mediocre, at worst kind of like forgettable. So ultimately, this collection of films is not really particularly recommended, I have to say. It's very kind of lo-fi. There's very little in regards to kind of effects or kind of like visually kind of interesting. I don't think any of the kind of the stories are all that clever, maybe with the exception of the snuff one, which I think is probably the cleverest. And I have to say, probably the most interesting thing about this short collection of short films, the wraparound story, although the acting was super cheesy, I have to say had a neat conceit, and kind of that was like quite a fun idea about this kind of cursed book, and the owner sort of makes the point of sort of saying, don't do this. But then again, that same conceit is repeated again in The Man in the Mirror. So it's kind of a little bit of a damp squid. Not terrible. These films aren't going to offend anyone. They're just going to be very forgettable. I'll give it a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.